Hello, I'm Jan Shravinsky and you're watching Break the Fake. They make them, we break them, and tell you everything you need to know. Now, today we're going to talk about two famous, or perhaps infamous, individuals who ironically consider themselves masters of diplomacy, Sergei Lavrov and Vlad Solovyov. Let's start with Lavrov, who has always had much to say. Recently, he started rather defiantly that the implementation of American plans to deploy medium and short-range ground-based missiles will not go unanswered. We do not rule out additional steps in the field of nuclear deterrence. End of quote. Sounds threatening, right? But don't worry. It's just Lavrov, so it probably means Russia will simply buy more red paint for the nuclear buttons to make them look scarier. Now, Lavrov added that decisions on these matters belong to the President of the Russian Federation. Great, because we know Putin always makes rational and calm decisions, and definitely not based on what he sees on RT during his gym break. Lavrov also reminded us that it was Washington's decision 5 years ago to withdraw from the international treaty on the elimination of such weapons that led to the current state of affairs. Wonderful, because Russia never broke those treaties, right? Never, ever. Building up their arms industry was just a form of occupational therapy. And now, a quick plot twist. Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan announced that Russian TV channels would be blocked for, and I quote, disrespecting Armenia and its interests, end of quote. Because nothing says friendship like blocking your neighbor's TV when they try to piss you off. And yes, Armenian authorities have already blocked the Russian Channel 1, or Первый Канал, citing the channel's debt to the Armenian Broadcasting Network. Classic. Finally, we come to our favorite red-nosed clown, Vladimir Solovyov. Yes, the same one who came up with a plan to deal with the Hague Tribunal's order of arrest. Vlad, as always, takes the easy way out. First, you ignore the summons, then you avoid extradition, and finally, well, maybe you find a way to suddenly disappear off the radar. How simple is that?
И то, что МУ создан хрен знает для чего, хрен знает кем, и не пользуется никаким уважением, никакой репутацией. Мерзавцы и ничтожества. Просто забавно, как внутри сообщества мерзавцев и ничтожества они друг с другом тявкают, ненавидят друг друга, переживают. Ну, конечно, потому что их баллонка сошла с ума и стала кусать руку хозяина. А мы презираем и баллонку, и хозяев. И у нас ноль к ним уважения. У меня лично вообще ноль уважения ко всем этим международным инстанциям после суда над Югославией. Да. После всего того, что они вытворили тогда, вот все эти суд в Гааге, да бомбу надо туда отправить, вот прямо в этот суд. Небольшую, но мощную. Чтобы так вот резиновую, каучуковую. Чтобы прыгала и по башке им била.
I wonder what's next. Maybe Lavrov will send a holiday card to Joe Biden with a list of demands, and Solovyov will start selling guides on how to avoid international tribunals in 3 easy steps. It's the universe of Russian diplomacy where anything is possible, and common sense is always a welcome guest who never shows up. Now, today, we also want to talk about one important issue. Corruption in Ukraine. You asked us about this in the comments, and we've decided it's time to address it. It remains a serious problem in post-Soviet countries, after all, in particular in Russia. But how does Kiev deal with this particular issue? Well, let's take a look. For example, the ex-Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Vyacheslav Shapovalov, was charged with obstructing the legitimate activities of the armed forces of Ukraine and other military formations during a special period. According to the investigation, he lobbied for the conclusion of contracts for the supply of products for the military at inflated prices, the purchase of bulletproof vests and other items of low quality for the armed forces. End of quote. And there are many examples of this. Do Ukrainians know about it? Let's take a look at what a war veteran and Special Operations Forces member had to say about the issue.
Я знав, що крадуть, але я не думав, що настільки масштабно. Я знав, що є корупція, і я не думав, що вона є основною проблемою. Я все-таки думав, що наша основна проблема станом на тоді – це війна з Росією. Ні. Виявляється, ні. І ця корупція, вона вбиває не менше людей, ніж російська зброя, насправді. Тому що Якщо ми будемо брати 10 загиблих солдат, то їх сміло можна ділити на два. 5 загинуло від російських куль, а 5 загинуло від російських куль, тому що в нас тут корупція. Отак я зараз розсуждаю.
During the almost 3 years of war, corruption awareness increased significantly in Ukrainian society. Now, more than ever, ordinary citizens understand that corruption can literally become deadly. At the end of the day, whether the country's defenders have access to weapons and high-quality defense gear to save their lives and liberate occupied territories and their residents depends on the effective use of taxpayers' money. The war laid bare the nerve of tolerance for corruption. But let's just talk facts, shall we? It's not Ukraine that is the worst country ever because of corruption. Over the past 10 years, corruption has been a frequent topic of discussion in public discourse. Anti-corruption agencies were created from scratch and, even after the full-scale Russian invasion, continued to reveal corruption cases and catch high-ranking officials red-handed. People once considered untouchable are being prosecuted. Can you imagine something like this happening in Russia? And of course, as the Break the Fake team, we can see Russian fingerprints all over this. Corruption in Ukraine is a very convenient argument not to provide Ukraine with financial aid and weapons. Why give it to someone who ends up stealing it? Do you often hear about corruption in Belarus or in Russia? Almost never. But how can you compare Belarus or Russia with Ukraine anyway? If you criticize the government in those countries, you will be killed or imprisoned in the best cases. But this does not mean that there is no corruption in, say, Belarus. However, Ukraine is a free democratic country with freedom of speech and state institutions capable of preventing and exposing corruption. And we really do hope that the Ukrainian nation will deal with those in power who are only concerned about the money and not the people. In Russia, on the other hand, corruption is not a bug, it is a feature. Now, recently Vladimir Putin questioned the legitimacy of President Volodymyr Zelensky. While answering journalists' questions on Tuesday before his flight back to Moscow from Uzbekistan, Putin said that, and I quote, according to preliminary assessment, the only legitimate power of Ukraine remains the parliament and the Speaker of Parliament.
Конституция Украины предусматривает продление полномочий, но только Рады. О продлении полномочий президента в Конституции Украины ничего не сказано. Но есть статья 111 Конституции Украины, которая говорит о том, что в этом случае полномочия верховной власти, фактически президентские полномочия, передаются спикеру парламента. Я в третий раз повторяю. Закон 2016 года говорит о том, что нельзя проводить выборы президента в условиях военного положения. Но нигде не сказано, что эти полномочия пролонгируются. Значит, что? Смотри 111 статью Конституции. Вся власть переходит спикеру парламента.
Putin said that according to Article 111 of the Constitution of Ukraine, all power is transferred to the Speaker of the Parliament. However, this statement is not true. In fact, Article 111 refers to the possibility of impeachment of the president in case he commits treason or another crime. It seems that Putin simply confused the articles and interpreted them very creatively. Now, despite this blunder, Putin repeatedly cited articles of the Ukrainian constitution in an attempt to present himself as an expert on fundamental laws of the country and demanded their implementation. Right, so you invade the country first and then you want them to follow their own legislation, which they follow anyway, but you say they don't. I mean, confusing, right? Anyway, it is a pity that he did not quote Article 133 of the Constitution of Ukraine, which refers to Crimea, Donetsk, Lugansk, Zaporizhia and Kherson regions occupied illegally by Russia. It would do Putin well to read the entire 10th chapter of the Constitution on the Autonomous Republic of Crimea, for example. Then again, at this stage, Putin is trembling at the thought of a possible attack on the Kerch Bridge built illegally in occupied Crimea, so what do we know? It's classic Russia anyway, committing war crimes and then crying out, "But Ukraine doesn't follow the constitution." So, we end this episode of Break the Fake on that bombshell, but we're coming back at the same time tomorrow, and in the meantime, please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.